Welcome to the deep dive. You sent over some really interesting material this time. A look at when market research maybe doesn't quite get it right. We often see it as this solid foundation for business decisions. But your sources, they really showed how easily things can go off track.
They certainly did.
So our plan today really is to help you, the listener, get a handle on how to look at market research a bit more critically, to spot the potential, weak spots, whether you work with it directly or just come across the findings.
Absolutely. Because, well, if that initial data is shaky, the knock-on effects for a business can be huge, really significant.
Like what sort of things?
Well, imagine you develop a whole product based on a misunderstanding of what your customers are actually looking for.
Oh, yeah.
You could sink a ton of resources, time, money into something that just flops because the market didn't really want it in the first place.
Right. And that kind of misread, it's not just a tiny blip, is it? One of the articles you shared really hammered this home, how it can just snowball.
Exactly.
You're talking wasted R&D, wasted manufacturing costs, and then boom, really poor sales. Hits the bottom line hard.
Precisely. And it's not just the product development side either. Think about marketing, your budget there.
Okay.
If your research tells you your ideal customer hangs out, I don't know, on platform X, but really they're all on platform Y,
Right.
you could be pouring cash into ads that your actual target audience never even sees.
Yeah, like shouting into the void, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Just burning through cash with nothing to show for it. We've all seen campaigns like that, unfortunately.
We have.
But the damage isn't just financial, right? The sources also mentioned something about reputation.
Yes, that's a really key point. If you launch a product based on bad research and it fails, or if your marketing campaign just completely misses the mark with the audience, that can seriously damage your brand's credibility. People lose trust. And trust, well, it takes ages to build and seconds to break.
So true. And in today's market, things change so fast. You can't afford to be working with outdated or just plain wrong information.
Definitely not.
If your research isn't picking up on new trends or, what your competitors are up to, you're kind of flying blind.
It leaves you incredibly vulnerable. You need that accurate read on the market just to stay in the game.
Which all comes back to, I guess, the quality of the data itself and how you collected it in the first place.
That's the foundation. Validated sources, rigorous methods. It's not just jargon. It's absolutely essential for getting insights you can actually rely on.
Okay, so let's dig into some specifics then. How does this research actually go wrong? A big theme in your sources was biased methodology. What does that actually look like?
Well, bias, fundamentally, it just means the way you designed your research or the way you gathered the information, it kind of systematically pushes the results in one direction. So it doesn't give you a true picture.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a survey question. Imagine asking something like, don't you agree that our amazing new product is far better than the competition?
Okay, yeah, that's pretty loaded.
Right. It's clearly leading the person. You're practically telling them what to say. A neutral coin would be more like, how would you compare our new product to the competition? Or even just, what are your thoughts on our new product?
That makes sense. The first one's basically fishing for compliments. You're not going to get an honest view. And the sources also mention sampling issues.
Exactly. Sampling is huge. If you want to understand, say, all smartphone users, but you only survey people visiting one specific tech store in one city.
Right.
Well, you're getting a very narrow slice. That group might not represent smartphone users in general at all. You're missing maybe older users, less techie people, people in rural areas. You get the idea.
It's like judging a whole meal based on just tasting the salt. You miss all the other flavors.
Perfect analogy. You miss the diversity.
And one source mentioned confirmation bias. That sounds interesting. How does that work in research?
Confirmation bias. It's a sneaky one. It's our human tendency to favor information that just confirms what we already think or believe. So a researcher might, maybe unintentionally, design questions or focus on data points that support their initial hunch, their hypothesis.
Yeah.
And they might downplay or even ignore data that contradicts it.
So if I think young people love my product, I might unconsciously focus on the positive feedback from the 18-25 group and ignore criticism from older groups.
Precisely. You see what you want to see, essentially, and that can lead you down completely the wrong path, thinking your belief is validated when the overall picture is actually quite different.
Wow, okay. That seems like a major pitfall. So if bias is such a risk, what can businesses actually do about it? How do you minimize it?
Well, there are definitely ways. First off, diverse sampling is key, making sure you really are reaching a proper cross-section of the group you're interested
All
in.
right, getting that representative slice.
Exactly. Then crafting your questions very carefully. Keep them neutral, objective, no leading language, no loaded terms, just straightforward questions.
Makes sense.
And another good practice is getting a third party involved. Someone who wasn't part of the initial design, maybe, to review the plan, the questions, the methodology.
Ah, like a fresh pair of eyes.
Exactly. They can often spot potential biases or assumptions that the original team might have missed because they're too close to it.
Oh, okay, that seems practical. Now, another thing your sources really flagged was small sample sizes.
Yeah.
It feels intuitive, right? Asking only 5 people isn't very reliable. But why is that, statistically speaking?
Yeah. The core issue is what we call statistical significance, or rather, the lack of it with small samples.
Okay.
When you only have a few responses, it's really hard to tell if what you're seeing is a real pattern or just, random chance, an anomaly.
So, like, if you flip a coin 3 times and get heads each time, you wouldn't conclude the coin always lands heads.
Exactly. Perfect example. With only 3 flips, that outcome is quite possible just by chance. But if you flipped it 300 times and got all heads, then you'd suspect something was up with the coin. It's the same with surveys. If you ask, say, 15 people, and 12 prefer option A, that seems strong. But maybe those 12 just happen to be unusual. With a larger sample, say 500 people, those random variations tend to cancel each other out. You get a much clearer, more stable picture of the overall preference.
So a couple of really strong opinions in a small group can skew the whole result.
Absolutely. Outliers have a much bigger impact in small samples. And this leads straight to the danger of overgeneralization.
Which is?
Taking those results from your tiny, possibly unrepresentative group, and then assuming they apply to everyone in your target market. You make broad statements based on very flimsy evidence.
Leading to potentially very wrong assumptions about what customers want or how they behave.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And another related point is that small samples often fail to capture the different segments within a market.
Ah, yeah. Because markets usually aren't just one big homogeneous blob.
Right. You have different age groups, different income levels, different needs, different motivations. A small sample might completely miss the views of an important subgroup.
So you might think everyone feels one way, but actually there's a key segment that feels completely differently, and you just didn't talk to enough of them.
Exactly that. That's why the sources really push for larger sample sizes where feasible. Or they mention techniques like stratified sampling.
Stratified sampling, what's that?
It's where you deliberately structure your sample to make sure you include people from different important subgroups, often in proportion to how common they are in the actual population.
Okay, so if your market is 60% women and 40% men, you make sure your sample is also roughly 60-40.
Basically, yes. It helps make even a somewhat smaller sample more representative of the overall diversity. It's a way to be more targeted.
Interesting. Okay, shifting gears a bit. The sources also talked about relying too much on technology, which seems a bit counterintuitive, maybe. Tech makes things faster, easier. Where's the downside?
Well, the speed and convenience are definitely appealing, but the sources warn that sometimes that speed comes at the expense of, well, quality and depth. Take automated tools for online surveys or scraping social media comments. They're fast, they can process huge amounts of data, but they often struggle with nuance, context. Like they might not get sarcasm or irony or the subtle reasons why someone feels a certain way. They just count keywords or assign a simple positive-negative score.
Right, like trying to understand a complex conversation just by reading a transcript without hearing the tone of voice.
Yeah.
You miss a lot.
That's a good way to put it. And there's another issue. The tools themselves can introduce bias.
How?
Think about online surveys. Who are they most likely to reach? People who are comfortable online, digitally active.
Okay, yeah.
So you might be unintentionally underrepresenting older people, or maybe lower income groups who have less internet access, or just people who aren't glued to screens all day. Your sample becomes skewed towards the tech savvy.
That's a really subtle but important point. We assume tech is neutral, but its reach isn't always even. What about things like AI analyzing sentiment?
Yeah, sentiment analysis. It's powerful, but it's far from perfect. The sources mentioned how AI can misinterpret language easily. It might see the word sick and think it's negative, even if the context is that skateboard trick was sick, meaning it was great.
Ah, Right. Context is everything.
It is. And relying only on this kind of automated analysis means you often miss out on the richer, qualitative insights, the why behind the numbers, things you'd get from actually talking to people, like in focus groups or interviews.
So it's not about ditching technology altogether.
Not at all. It's about finding a balance, using tech for its strengths, scale, speed, processing power, but complementing it with human oversight, critical thinking, and qualitative methods to get that deeper understanding.
Okay. Use tech smartly, but don't let it replace human judgment entirely.
Exactly. Cross-referencing findings from different methods, quantitative and qualitative, is usually the most robust approach.
Got it. Okay, final area, the sources covered. The challenge of using lots of different data sources. We're swimming in data today, right? From surveys, sales figures, social media, web analytics. But putting it all together isn't straightforward.
Far from it. One of the biggest headaches is just inconsistency.
In what way?
Different sources might measure the same kind of thing but use totally different scales or definitions. One site uses 5 stars, another uses a 1-10 scale. Customer support logs might use resolved versus unresolved. Sales data tracks units, marketing tracks engagement.
Ah, okay. Apples and oranges. Trying to directly compare them or add them up is meaningless or worse, misleading.
Precisely. And then there's the whole issue of quality and reliability varying wildly between sources.
Right. You might have your own carefully conducted survey data, but then you're also looking at random comments on a forum somewhere. How do you weigh those?
Exactly. Deciding which data to trust more, especially when findings seem to conflict, is really tricky. And the sources also talked about plain old information overload.
Just too much stuff.
Yeah. Especially with unstructured data, like thousands of open-ended comments or social media posts. Trying to manually sift through all that to find meaningful patterns can be overwhelming. It can lead to analysis paralysis, where you just don't know where to start or what to conclude.
So, faced with this data deluge, what's the approach?
Well, the sources stress having clear criteria up front for judging your sources. How was the data collected? Is the source credible? How old is it? Is it relevant to your specific question?
Okay, be disciplined about vetting your inputs.
Yes. And using data integration tools can help sometimes to pull different structured data sets together. But often it really comes down to having experienced analysts, people who know how to handle diverse data types, spot inconsistencies, and synthesize the information into a coherent story.
Right, the human element again. And actually, on that point about inconsistent data, you shared a really striking stat, a fast fact from the Market Research Society.
Ah, yes. The 2023 study, it found that around 35%, more than a third of businesses, said they struggle to get reliable data, specifically because of inconsistencies in methodologies and sources.
Wow, 35%. So this isn't just a theoretical problem. It's a real widespread challenge businesses are grappling with right now.
It absolutely is. It really puts all these potential pitfalls into a real-world context.
It certainly does. So thinking about everything we've just discussed, the biases, the sample sizes, the tech issues, the data inconsistencies, as you, our listener, encounter market research, maybe at work, maybe just reading an article, what kinds of questions might pop into your head now? Well, when you're presented with those findings, whatever the context might be, it's definitely giving me food for thought.